us for recovery. Oops, I'm going to repeat that. Thanks for joining us for Recovery Residence 101. We're excited you guys are here. It's a great opportunity for you guys to learn more about WAQRR and about what we do. And yes, you will have access to the recording for the questions in there. I'm going to take just a couple minutes here, and each of us are going to introduce ourselves and maybe share how we're associated with Recovery Residence or what brought us to us. So I'm Carmen. I'm the executive director and a housing operator of Hope Street, which is a recovery residence for women in Walla Walla. And I was drawn to Recovery Residence because I had a daughter who struggled with substance use disorder. So Bree, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Briana Yocum. I'm the Director of Accreditation at Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences. And what brought me to recovery housing was really my own personal story. I'm a woman in long-term recovery, and recovery housing was really the missing piece for me and what helped me gain that long-term sobriety and support. And so that just blossomed into my motivation to help others. And I ran some recovery residences, and now I'm with WAQRR helping operators open up and learn about the realms of recovery housing. So
thanks, Bree. Alan, you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Muia. I am the executive director of an organization called New Earth Recovery. We operate 6 recovery homes in Skagit County, Washington, of course. My other hat is I serve on the board of the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences and was a part of founding the organization that's putting on this webinar today.
Thank you. Jason.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Bliss. I'm happy to be here with you all this morning. I'm proud to serve in the role as Executive Director of the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences. I've been in my role with WAQRR coming up on 3 years. Maybe it's a little longer. To be honest, it seems like I started yesterday, and time has just absolutely flown by. I've worked in the recovery housing field for well over a decade. Worked with a wide variety of houses across the Pacific Northwest, up in Alaska, Montana, over in Pennsylvania. I've had the opportunity to work with men's homes, women with children, men with children. Had some opportunity to do some consulting work with various different tribal entities and state entities, and recovery housing has always been near and dear to me. I too am a person in long-term recovery. If it was not for recovery housing many years ago, I honestly can't say that I would be sitting here today. So recovery housing has always been near and dear to me. I've came across many different circumstances and many different scenarios in my years and years in doing this. And I always like to tell everybody that just when I think I've learned everything, literally tomorrow's a new day and I get a new phone call. But it's always a pleasure to be able to continue to learn and help individuals just like you guys navigate this great world of recovery housing. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Sarah?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you. My name is Sarah Karr, and I am the Assistant of Accreditation with the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences. Recovery residences are near and dear to my heart as well. I have multiple family members that have gone through the process and are just shining stars in the community and in the world today, and I'm so happy to be here and be a part of this organization. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sarah. So since we have kind of a small group, I would love if you would be willing to share your name and organization, if applicable, where you're at, and maybe what draws you to recovery housing. So if you're comfortable pulling yourself off of mute and sharing that, that would be great.
Hi there, I'll go. My name is Christina Stivers. I currently work in Stevens County, Washington. I'm the outreach navigator for a recovery navigator program and in recovery myself. As of May 1st, I will be the project manager for a recovery residence that we are hoping to get started. It'll be the first one in the area, so much needed. So I am super excited and have been through this process myself and look forward to it.
Nice.
Thank you.
I'm Rose. I work for Family Sports Center of South Sound, so we're in Thurston County. I am a CPC, but I don't know much about anything recovery. I usually transfer that part of my job to my supervisor because I was doing 2 different jobs, like in the same company. But now that I am just a CPC, I thought I would learn more on how to handle that all by myself, obviously with my supervisor's help. But yeah, just here to learn more about what I can do to help my clients.
Awesome. Thanks, Rose.
Hi there, I'm Fernanda Hamlin. New to recovery housing. I am actually in the process. I'm here in where am I? Yakima, Washington. I am here purchasing my first home, and very, very new to, recovery housing. However, alcohol addiction and substance use has been a part of my family and friends. And so the opportunity to really help people on their journey, I'm all about, just helping people be better. And as I go along my journey to be a better person in the world and make a difference. And so looking forward to working with you all and learning from you all and changing some lives.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fernanda.
Hi, I'm Angelo. I'm new to Washington and just bought a home recently. Looking forward to converting it into a recovery home. I'm still having renovations done and stuff too. My background, I'm an addiction medicine physician, which is kind of what led me in this direction. Community I grew up in was affected by addiction.
Angela,
everything.
what community are you in?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I'm in
okay.
Seattle.
Okay.
So the home is in Rainier Valley.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else want to introduce themselves? You don't have to.
We have a few in the chat. Tim says, Tim Cook, no microphone for a few minutes. Tried sober living in Arizona, was too far away, trying in Washington. Currently in-home care and adult family homes in Western Washington and Spokane. And then there's Anna. She says a care specialist at Community Action. Let's Gadget. So if anyone else wants to hop on.
I saw somebody come off mute. Did you want to share?
Yes, I'm in transit between meetings. Richard Berghammer. I was trying to do this safely since I'm driving. But yes, I'm with Fellowship House out next to PLU in Parkland, Washington, Pierce County. And so I'm a case manager, do counseling there, and it's a transitional living location, but we wanted to find out more about the variations between, we know there's permanent supportive housing, and recovery residences, and we were asked to maybe transition between being a transitional location and more of a, find out what the nuances are here and how it might benefit our residents. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Richard. Drive safe. Another one in the chat. Welcome, Cassandra. What'd she say? From Olympia.
And Karen, it looks like Aaron Smith just joined us as well.
Okay. Aaron, we're taking just a minute if you want to introduce yourself. If you're with an organization and share that, what location and what drew you to recovery housing, but don't feel pressure to have to do that if you're not comfortable with that.
Hello, yes, both Sarah and Briana are familiar with who I am. I was just speaking with Briana yesterday, and yeah, you guys are super helpful. I appreciate everything you do to kind of help us along in the process. I am a prospective recovery residence owner and so forth. I just closed on a property up in Marysville recently.
Nice.
And am looking to get that set up, and I'm going through the process for certification, and yeah, so yeah, joined a mastermind to kind of help along in the process and get a bit more knowledge and information and kind of lean on the expertise of others. So yeah.
Great. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you.
And
Anybody
also Karen,
else? Yeah.
Also joining us, it looks like Jeff Head just signed on. Jeff Head is one of our accredited providers up in the Spokane area.
Anybody else want to introduce yourself quickly?
I'm Sherry Nichols. I'm over here actually with Fernanda and the rest of our team. We just got a house yesterday in Yakima.
That's
So
great.
I should say we just put an offer in on a house. So we're just getting really excited, guys, to get up and going.
That's really excited. Good. Yay.
That's awesome, Sherry. Glad to hear that the stars aligned for your house hunting over there.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome. We spent actually all day yesterday visiting all the different wraparound services, and everything seems to be just flowing. So it's one thing after another.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll kind of get rolling here. So I noticed most of you have your microphones on mute. That's great. If you can keep them on mute, that would be awesome. If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat, and we really want to try and answer any questions you have. And hopefully we can kind of gear this towards who's here and what you guys need to know. But this is the overview of the day. We'll just do a little introduction into WAQRR. Who is WAQRR? What do they do? What are the activities that they provide? What support can they provide to you? We're going to learn about fair housing, the different levels of care of homes, because you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. What does that mean? And you'll learn about that. And we'll dig into a little bit more about, after lunch, we'll jump into some current topics. I think we'll talk about some co-occurring challenges, return to use, NIMBYism, but also just give us some opportunity if you guys have questions about current challenges that you might have. And then we'll talk specifically through the accreditation process. What does that look like? How do you do that? And then have time for questions and answers. So that's kind of how the day will look. I think that Bree is going to jump on next and share some information.
Yeah, thanks so much, Karen. So we're going to dive into a little bit of who we are here at WAQRR, at the Washington Alliance for Recovery Residences, kind of how we were established, and then some of our primary activities. So WAQRR was really established in 2017, and it started as just a group of recovery residence operators wanting to connect and share different experiences, and that kind of led into just some concern about the inconsistent recovery housing practices in Washington, just the inconsistent landscape. When you hear recovery housing, there wasn't really a clear definition or a clear set of standards that people were operating by. And so that was leading to some misguided operators. So really, that was like the inception of WAQRR. We are actually the Washington State affiliate of NARR, which is the National Alliance of Recovery Residences. And so we developed and adopted a set of national standards for care. And they were really developed to tackle those issues, to gain consistency and safety, really create an environment that can help sustain recovery, you know, with the ultimate goal being to help safeguard individuals in recovery and to just improve practices and have a place that operators can connect with each other. So here at WAQRR, we do accreditation, and Sarah's going to be touching on that later on in the day. But mainly we have an accreditation process where we help residents, operators to meet our quality standards. And it's basically just having a third party kind of dive into your documents, connect and find out more about your organization. And we're just trying to help operators meet kind of those basic quality standards that we have in place, but are there for a reason to really help maintain consistent care and quality in a recovery residence, so that people who are making referrals to recovery residences can know to and have confidence that when they are making the referrals, that they know that they are meeting some of those basic ethical principles, and that the residents who they're referring to are going to have that recovery support and care that they need. So we do accreditation, and again, Sarah will touch on that, and it's a 3-phase process of documents, interview, and then we actually go and visit the home, and we'll be kind of touching on our core principles as well later on in the day. The next thing we do is support and networking. So just like recovery housing is about connection, we really are advocates for our recovery housing operators to being able to connect with each other. We started a networking call monthly for those who have been through our process and are accredited, so that we can bounce ideas off of each other and just have that support network. You know, everyone's at different stages coming into this. Some people perhaps have never done it before, or brand new to the recovery housing field, and others have had, you know, years and years of experience doing it. And there's just so much goodness that will come out of connecting with each other and just bouncing ideas off of each other. And we're really hoping to do that later on today as well. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to bring them, because we all learned from those questions, and it can really help other people as well. So we do support and networking. And then lastly, we do professional development and training. So we do monthly, we hold best practice webinars or emerging issue webinars. And so those are really fun to attend, and you can send your residents to them if you feel like it's going to benefit them. You can send your staff to them. Of course, we want you guys there. And that's monthly. We have those, and we have annually, we have in-person events for our accredited operators where we help. We do a house leadership training. So for their house leads, we all get together and have like a 2-day retreat and learn about WAQRR and learn about some best practices when it comes to being a manager of a recovery home, as well as connecting with the operators there as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we do. We also offer technical assistance. So for those who perhaps need help with the accreditation process, we're more than willing to meet on Zoom and help guide you through the process. Or perhaps you're new to recovery housing in general and just don't know where to start, but you have a dream of opening up a recovery home. We can actually meet with you one-on-one and help answer your questions there and help kind of guide you in the right direction so that you can successfully open. So really our goal is to increase the quality and the quantity of recovery homes in Washington in whatever ways we can. And we're really here for you and for helping in that regard. So with that, I'm just gonna dive into the definition of what a recovery residence is. Because like I said, that's kind of why we're formed in the beginning, is just not having that clear definition. People were operating under the guise of being a recovery home, but not meeting those standards really of what a recovery home is. So let's dive into this definition of what is a recovery residence. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. And this is from SAMHSA. So it says, recovery houses are safe, healthy, family-like, substance-free living environments that support individuals in recovery from addiction. While recovery residences vary widely in structure, all are centered on peer support and a connection to services that promote long-term recovery. Recovery housing benefits individuals in recovery by reinforcing a substance-free lifestyle and providing direct connection to other peers in recovery, mutual support groups, and recovery support services. Substance-free does not prohibit prescribed medications taken as directed by a licensed prescriber, such as pharmacotherapies specifically approved by the Food and Drug Administration for the treatment of opioid use disorder, as well as other medications with FDA-approved indications for the treatment of co-occurring disorders. So let's just dive into that definition real quick. So one of the things that pops out when reading it is just kind of these three terms here in the beginning: is safe, healthy, family-like environment. So really what recovery housing is we're wanting to create the right environment to where we can see lasting change by providing, you know, what it says in this definition: peer support, connection to services, family-like. So really this definition mirrors what our quality standards help get people to implement in their recovery residence. So I know our quality standards, we really want to see when we walk into the home that it has a family-like feel rather than an institution. So whether that be pictures on the wall, the way it's laid out, that there's gathering spaces, but not only that, outwardly, we want to walk in and kind of feel that camaraderie between residents, and that it's kind of that they're living out their recovery together as like a unit, and that they're really connecting with each other and kind of living as a functioning family. So that's really important. So let's see here. So the family-like, safety is also a big thing that pops out to me when reading this definition too. And with our quality standards, we actually check for some safety policies, and then we also check for during our site visit, just that those basic safety elements are met. Another big thing about this definition too, as it relates to WAQRR and to our standards, is just the connection aspect. So people can get sober, but it's really that connection that helps individuals stay in long-term recovery. There's a quote that Alan always says, and it's a pretty common one, but it's the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's connection. And so we're really wanting to create environments where that connection can happen. And then lastly, in this definition, is really the end piece here where it talks about substance-free and abstinence-based. So, of course, there's different modalities, that there's different avenues to recovery. We really want to support people where they're at, but as far as this definition goes of recovery residence, we're really talking about the abstinence-free aspect. I know there's different avenues like permanent supportive or housing first, or even harm reduction. But this definition is really distinguishing that we're abstinence-based. And that's not saying that reoccurrences don't happen. And that's why we're going to be having a group discussion later about what some policies can look like to support the house and to support the individual when that happens. But mainly it's when individuals make that decision to be abstinence-based that we can create those residences to support that. So it's needed at all levels, all the different modalities and avenues to support people on this journey, but we're really focusing on the abstinence-based. And then at the bottom here, talking about how illicit substances, it doesn't mean being addicted to or not being addicted, but being dependent on a medically assisted treatment. They really intentionally put that in there about, you know, for some individuals that having that medically assisted treatment is what really helps helps them function at a baseline. Not that that everyone needs it, but for those individuals that do, it's not saying that that isn't allowed. We definitely want to support people in their recovery in whatever ways they need it. So, and with that, any questions about what is a recovery residence or kind of what we do here at WAQRR?
We've got a rather small and more intimate group today. And guys, if we usually just put all the questions in the chat or hold off till the end, but as we pause in between things like this, jumping on to the next topics, if you guys have questions and such that come to mind, most definitely don't hesitate to ask.
So this is Fernanda. I do have a quick question.
Sure.
When talking about agencies that offer the wraparound services, you know, with regards to connection to those services that promote long-term recovery, do you have a list of folks in the different counties or communities that you specifically work with for those wraparound services? I mean, I know we did some of our own due diligence finding, you know, those types of services in the Yakima and, you know, area. Our property is going to be in Selah. And just wondering if you guys, you know, have a comprehensive list so that it could just help us. I know we went around to some agencies yesterday and we were able to get a hold of the different NA and AA meetings and some things like that. But just wondering if you guys happen to have a comprehensive list maybe that you've created over time in the different counties.
Yeah, due to the fact that that's kind of constantly changing and it varies, we don't have a master list, but
Okay.
it seems like what you're doing is a good start just to help build that. And it would also be good to, could be a networking with other residences in your area too, to help kind of start that discussion of, hey, where are some of the community supports that you refer your residents to, and what good connections do you have? Because yeah, it's all about that networking and kind of as you go, just building that list as well.
Okay.
But sounds like you're doing a really good start to it.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe a follow-up question is, and am I right? You guys have a registry of the accredited operators on your website. I could possibly just go to that and look for folks who have homes in Yakima or, you know, nearby and reach out to them directly. Is that okay to do?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Of course. Christina.
Hi there. I was just gonna ask real quick because I know there's different levels as far as recovery residences go. I'm just wondering as far as because I'm sure there's quite a few people like involved in MAP programs and things. Is it required to have someone administering, well, not administering, but I guess giving those out and keeping track of those, or is this normally kind of like a self-administer, keep track of your own medications?
Yeah, when you get into administering, that's like a totally different, that goes into like level 3 and 4 and having the right licenses to do that. So really when we're speaking of like operating a recovery residence, like level 2, which is mainly, it's pretty broad in Washington, and Alan will go into the different levels of care. Yes, it would be them self-administering it. You could put certain safeguards up, like and one of our quality standards is that they have a space where they can lock their medications up. So whether that be you having, you know, a lockable space in your office and you're kind of letting them self-administer, or if they're holding on to it themselves. And, you know, you could still have the preemptive policies like watching them count their medicine and things like that. But as far as kind of dispensing them or touching them, yeah, that's kind of a line that
Okay, yeah, perfect.
watch out for. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, any more questions come up, feel free to let me know. I'm gonna pass it on.
All right. Hi again, everyone. I want to just talk about, so we're so far just sort of setting up the foundational pieces, right? So starting with the definition, what are we talking about when we talk about a recovery residence? Now I want to sort of shift gears a little bit, but still kind of in the bigger picture. And we'll kind of get into, as the day goes on, we'll just get more and more specific. But in the bigger picture, we want to sort of set the framework for what is it that that sort of sets up recovery residences to begin with. In other words, do we have the right to exist, or are we somehow at the mercy of municipalities and other people who, or neighbors or other people who might have an opinion about whether we exist or not? And so just wanted to go over the brief kind of legal framework for our existence, honestly, which really lies in the term fair housing. So to really kind of summarize what I'm about to say, and Jason's going to go into a little more detail, is that we have the right, as people in recovery have the right to live together for mutual support. And there are laws that govern that and that prohibit others from kind of curtailing that right. And so it's really important to say that. Obviously, I really appreciated the comments a few minutes ago about kind of going around, introducing yourself, being a good neighbor, all those things which we'll talk about today. But so we always want to start with a kind of putting forth the goodness of what we're doing, but on the sort of the bottom line is we have the right to exist as recovery residences that are helping people live together for mutual support. And so I'll just and so the basics of that lie in a few different laws federally. So the first one is the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And that's really where we're going to focus today, and it really is the large basis. So people can't discriminate against people who are in recovery because they're in recovery, is what that boils down to. They are a protected class. Secondly, if there's federal funding for an organization, they may also be protected by the Rehabilitation Act, because again, we're working with folks with disabilities. And because of that, the Rehabilitation Act might apply. It's a fairly narrow band of housing, though, that receives direct federal funding. So that may or may not apply to most of us. And then the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, specifically Title II, when we're talking about local and state government is providing housing, that also provides some protection for our folks. So the next slide talks about, just real broadly, if we could go to that, just the things that the Fair Housing Act, we call them protected classes in the act. So the act basically says in the area of housing, people broadly can't discriminate. So that means landlords can't discriminate. It means that municipalities can't discriminate. It means that neighbors can't discriminate. All of that falls under the Fair Housing Act against people who fit into these classes. And so the one, of course, that applies the most to our folks is disability. And we'll get into the specifics a little bit, but essentially, if someone is in recovery from a substance use disorder, they have a disability, unless they're not in active recovery. And what that means is if they're still using a substance in the house, they lose that protection of the Fair Housing Act. So an operator can't say, "Hey, we're basically as a screen to run a drug house," say that they're a recovery house. They lose the protection. They no longer have the right to be a recovery residence if people are using within the home. So I think I'll turn it over to Jason to get a little bit more specific about kind of how this stuff shakes out on the ground.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I'm gonna dive in a little bit, take a little bit of a deeper dive, if you will, into some fair housing and disability stuff, and how specifically that applies to recovery residences. Fair housing and disability, as Alan touched on a little bit, individuals with disabilities may not be excluded from or denied equal benefits of housing opportunities offered by private entities or local, state, or federal government because of a disability. One of the key things here to remember and to pick up on that is the word disability. By federal law, by federal statutes, individuals in recovery from drug and or alcohol abuse are also covered under this law, meaning the federal government has taken a stance that individuals that are in recovery from alcohol or drug addiction, and one of the key things they're in recovery from, are a protected class and considered disabled. That one of the key things to pick up on and remember there is if a person has returned to active use and is in the home, that the part of the Disability Act no longer applies there. This means that a group of people in recovery living together for mutual support cannot be treated differently than a single family. So a lot of people, this comes up from time to time, all across Washington state, and in my many years of doing this, a lot of local municipalities, city, county, have enacted and put land use and zoning regulations in place that sometimes will specifically target recovery homes. They're put into place, they're singling out individuals with disability in recovery from substance abuse. And I can't stress this enough that at the end of the day, that violates federal fair housing law. Discrimination sometimes it may be intentional, meaning the regulations are such that they choose to put in place procedural requirements were enacted with either a discriminatory motive or are being applied in a discriminatory manner. I've worked with individuals, housing operators all over Washington state, and some of them have called. Jason, we're starting to get calls from local code enforcement that says we can't have that we can't have a recovery residence here, or Jason, they claim that no more than 3 or 4 or 5 unrelated individuals may live under one roof. Or some of the other calls that I'll get, Jason, they're now classifying us as a business, as a recovery residence entity, and they're requiring us to go down and take out special licenses. Really, it's all of that I've just mentioned is a mischaracterization, if you will, of a recovery residence that some cities choose to look at them as a business. For all of us that are seeking to locate recovery homes and have been told by local governments that the use is a business and are not permitted in residential zones, one of the things that's very important to know is that, however, courts throughout the country have confirmed that simply because the use of a dwelling may entail some management functions, such activities do not change the essential character of a single family or multifamily dwelling of a residence, and in no way classifies this as a business or for commercial use. Some cities and some entities do have the right to say, if you have multiple quote unquote single family dwellings that are used for rental income that they can require you to have a business license to use those as rental property. But again, they cannot say that you have to hold a special business license just because you are choosing to have individuals that live in that home that are in recovery. Again, by federal definition, individuals that are living in that home that are in recovery from alcohol and or drug addiction are considered disabled. And again, cities and counties, though they may want to, though they may try, are prohibited by federal law by placing restrictions in place or laws that supersede the Federal Fair Housing Act. A lot of times, again, when I get these phone calls, they'll call and say, Jason, we've got an overzealous code enforcement officer. And a lot of times it may be an individual, new to the code enforcement side of things, that when they look, they see, hey, we've got rules, policies, and procedures that were adopted by the city council, and I need to follow them. 9 times out of 10, I've had quite a bit of success and luck with just calling and having some open and honest conversations and doing some education around the Federal Fair Housing Act and federal fair housing law. I've also sat in my fair share of city council meetings. Alan has had to do this as well up in his neck of the woods. I only bring all of this up to share with you guys that you're not alone in this process. If you guys run into roadblocks or hiccups along the way, you run into overzealous code enforcement officers or overzealous city managers that are out there, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll do my very best to work with you. I'll do my very best to work with them and try to do some education around the piece. Next slide, if we could.
Sorry. I have a question. I just want to throw it at you from Tim. It says, what about mortgage lenders who either refuse to lend or will only lend as commercial or investment property?
Well, again, the Federal Fair Housing Act has carve-outs in there for what I would call in this case is predatory lending or predatory loan improvement, if you will. Again, the federal stance around the Federal Fair Housing Act, again, prevents them for classifying individuals that are opening up a recovery residence as something they cannot look at it any different. They may be able to look at it as an investment property if you're purchasing it for that use and you're going to turn around and release that property or rent it out to individuals. Then I could understand the investment property side of things. But as far as a commercial use and a commercial property, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would be pretty hard pressed to think that they legally would have any stance to do that.
I think the trick is if you are an entity and not an individual, then they may have to say, hey, it's a business loan because you're a business and you're not an individual.
Yes.
So I think that's the trick. So if we have a loan on a piece of property up here, and because we established the loan as our nonprofit organization, we were held to a business loan kind of a standard. So I think that's the trick. I think if an individual came forward who lives in the house, again, we can't give legal advice on this particular issue, but my guess is banks have some maybe more prerogative than other kinds of examples that we're talking about to make that distinction. But that's a really good question, and it's probably worth us getting some legal advice on. We might just want to jot that down, Jason, and see we could maybe bring it back to this group if we get a different answer. And if so, then I'm shopping for a new loan.
Yeah, no,
So,
Alan, I'm thankful that you brought up that distinction. I was looking at it more, I guess, as an individual going in and an individual purchasing the property and an
right.
individual using as that. But
Yeah.
you bring up a valid point that if you went in as a commercial entity or a business, it would probably be viewed differently.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Fernanda,
my guess.
do you have a question?
Yes, just wanted to take a quick step back in regards to an individual in your home that we find out is using and how that impacts our fair housing protections. Now, I mean, because we know relapse happens and we obviously do things to try to address it immediately. To what degree does that impact us, I guess is my question, if that makes sense.
So Fernanda, if I'm gonna rephrase just to be sure that I hear you correctly. So are you asking that when an individual relapses in the home, if all of the federal fair housing and disability language applies to them, or does that change? Is that your question?
Yeah, I guess how does it impact our protections under the Fair Housing Act when someone relapses? I mean, like I said, I know we do what we can to try to address it right away, get them somewhere for 72 hours or whatever the case may be, and then re-invite them back.
So I'm going to say the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Washington State Landlord Tenant Act is a two-way street and a two-way street of protections. They are there and in place to protect you as a landlord. And I'll just give you a couple examples. When it comes down to the Landlord Tenant Act, sometimes recovery residence operators are believe that landlord tenant law and landlord tenant act in Washington state does not apply to them. In Washington state, it absolutely does apply to anyone renting a residence. However, there are carve-outs and such that are put into place. Usually when an individual rents a home, if you need to go evict an individual out of the home and get them out of the home because they don't want to leave, or they don't want to go get treatment, or whatever that may be, you're usually tied to a 30, 60, sometimes even a 90-day eviction process. The normal landlord tenant law in Washington state changes so quickly, it's hard for me to keep up on it. However, one thing I do know for fact, when it comes to recovery residences for individuals that have returned to active use, if you're not able to get them to leave the residence, you are able to serve them with a 72-hour notice here in Washington state. Very similarly, the Federal Fair Housing and Disability Act has some laws in there that are even a little stricter, if you will. If your recovery residence takes out I'm trying to think the best way to describe this, a federal startup loan, in this case that is administered by the Washington State Healthcare Authority, a $4,000 revolving loan. There are rules in there that says that any individual that returns to active use must be immediately expelled from the home in order to protect the other individuals. We're not saying that person needs to leave the house and never return to the house and it's over and done. as far as WAQRR goes and what we try to advocate for, and a lot of our providers have taken the stance on, get that person somewhere safe for the next 72 hours, whether that's over at a loved one's house, whether that's a detox facility, an inpatient facility. It's going to vary from person to person, but then after then, with the proper, what I want to say, guardrails up, proper contracts and whatever are around that, you're able to bring that individual back into the home. So I don't know if I've done a good enough job of answering your questions, but the key things that I want to point out is that Landlord Tenant Act and that Fair Housing Act offers protections not only for the individuals they're living in the home, but also as you guys as recovery residence operators as well.
Thank you.
I'll take us one quick swing, Jason. I think the short answer to the question is that that just because one person isn't in compliance with your sobriety policy, that doesn't wreck your protection. As long as you have a policy in place to work through that and to maintain your sober environment. Does that make sense? So I think that's so as long as you have a policy, you're following it, and the policy is that you are maintaining a sober environment with the understanding that we're working with a disorder that is a relapsing chronic condition, then obviously, then we're working within those guidelines and that understanding. No one's gonna fault you for that. So
Gotcha. Okay,
in other words,
thanks,
a neighbor
guys.
can't come in and say, "Hey, you got to shut down because someone used in your house." Like that can't happen.
Understood. All right, perfect. Thank you, guys.
Of course. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the legal backdrop. I've covered quite a bit of that just in the last slide. The legal backdrop around fair housing protections. Federal Fair Housing Act prohibits most landlords from discriminating against prospective tenants on the basis of disability, including being in recovery from addiction. But again, that there are some gray areas there too. And again, is what it comes down to is there's guardrails up on both sides. To protect not only the individuals that are living there in the house, but also protect you as operators as well. Fair housing landlords have rights too. Federal anti-discrimination laws do not require landlords to rent to anyone whose behavior may be a nuisance. Basically, who has poor credit, if you will. Bree, just pop up all those. Go back one. Whose behavior may be a nuisance, who has poor credit, or who is unable to pay room charges. Again, that those do not require landlords to rent to anyone. Meaning if there's individuals that are under the use of an illicit substance, you don't have to continue renting to them. It's actually just the opposite side of that. You have a due diligence to protect the rest of the individuals that are there living in your homes. And you as landlords have rights too. There are some protections for landlords regardless of disability. Again, the behavior that is a nuisance. If you have individuals that are there living in your home, they're upsetting the balance of your home, not wanting to go along with the rules, the policies and procedures as outlined, or being a disturbance in the home, individuals that have returned to active use. Again, the Washington State Landlord Tenant Act does have specific language in there that if you're not able to sit down with an individual and have an open and honest conversation with them, that it's just not going to work here. Worst case scenario, you're able to offer them a 3-day notice. One thing, guys, that I always like to mention, and in my years and years of doing this, I think that I've literally had to go to court twice. And that is with hundreds and hundreds of homes and hundreds of individuals that have lived in those homes. The to be able to sit down and have open and honest conversation with individuals about where they are, what they're going through, how it is it affecting the house, and the ability to work with them and find them somewhere else to go just goes so far. Again, communication is the whole key to this thing. If an individual relapses and a housing and provider just goes and approaches that individual and says, hey, you've relapsed, you've got to get all of your stuff together and you've got to go, that tends to be very argumentative, if you will. Things can go badly and things can go south, compared to if and when these circumstances come up, you're able to sit down with that person and have a conversation. Hey, look, here's what's going on. Here's how it's affecting you. Here's how it's affecting individuals in the house. It just can't continue to happen here. But we're not done. We're willing to help you get somewhere, to be able to get you the help that you need. Just the human and the compassionate side of that just goes so much further in working with individuals. Next slide, Bree. RCW 59.18.550, the termination of tenancy. Again, I touched on this. The landlord has the right to terminate the tenant's tenancy by delivering a 3-day notice to terminate with 1 day to comply. If a tenant living in a drug and alcohol-free housing uses, possesses, or shares alcohol, illegal drugs, controlled substances, or prescription drugs without a medical prescription, again, you can serve them with a 3-day notice. But again, it's been my experience 9 times out of 10, if you sit down and have that open and honest conversation with an individual and truly get to the bottom, the root cause of what happened, why it happened, and make an actionable plan moving forward, this 3-day notice will rarely have to be used. Again, and one other thing that I just want to hit home on, so many individuals are under the misconception that the Landlord-Tenant Act and Landlord-Tenant Law does not apply. And a lot of times when myself, Briana, the rest of my staff will get policies and procedures sent into us, they will actually embed the language in there that, hey, I'm signing that they attempt to have the residents that live in the house sign away their right to landlord-tenant law. One, that goes against and violates Washington state law, and 2, it just can't be done. Again, there are carve-outs to the Washington Landlord-Tenant Act that do apply to recovery residence operators, where they do not apply to if you were renting to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. But again, you just got to be very, very careful when you're putting together those policies and procedures, that we're not asking people to outright sign away their rights to the Landlord-Tenant Act in Washington, because ultimately it's illegal. Next slide. All right, and with that, I'm gonna turn it back over. I'm gonna turn it back over to Alan. But before I do, does anybody else have any other questions that applies to Federal Fair Housing Act, Landlord-Tenant Law, or any of the other topics that we've covered?
We are going to spend a little time this afternoon, for everyone, just so you know, talking about the return to use scenarios and how within the law we can work with residents and try to kind of hit some middle ground that protects the community, as well as provides support for the person who needs the support. So we'll talk about that. All right. Hearing none, we'll go forward. You can always throw in a question if it comes to you along the way. But so about 11 years ago or so, the organization that Bree mentioned earlier, the National Alliance for Recovery Residences, formed. And there were a number of state organizations at the time kind of doing this work, accrediting or certifying homes and creating networks and all of that. But what they figured out is they needed a way to create the umbrella that all of these homes fit under. And so they needed some definitions kind of under the umbrella of different kinds of homes. There are so many. There are halfway houses, there are three-quarter way houses, there's therapeutic communities, recovery houses, all kinds of language around what we do. And so they needed to kind of figure out, well, how do you sort of separate one kind of a house for another? Because the range of kind of what they look like is quite different. So in order to do that, they came up with a concept that they figured the best way to do that is with what they call levels of care. And this is just in the process of being updated. So I'm going to give you a somewhat outdated version, but we'll have it, as it sort of forms, it'll get better and better, and we'll be changing our own language here soon around all of this. But levels of care, fairly self-explanatory. It just means based on what a person needs when they come into a home, hopefully they're matched with the kind of home that is the best fit for them. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll kind of define this a little bit. Essentially, they came up with 4 levels of care that kind of to define, how homes differ from one another. And the first sort of category they used is about staffing. So who supports the home? The first level 1, is not staffed at all inside of the house, meaning there's nobody who's paid or is compensated to be in the house. It's peer run, peer supported. And in across the country, the best definition or the best sort of example of a level 1 home is an Oxford house. So if you hear about Oxford housing, what happens there is when the residents in the home make most major decisions, including whether somebody comes into the house, if somebody has to be asked to leave the house, how the money is going to get collected and split up, and how the bills are going to get paid, all of that. They elect their leadership within the house, and then the house is largely making those decisions. And so that's there's no staffing at all. In Washington, we're really blessed to have a group of people who support Oxford Housing. They're hired by Oxford House to be resource folks for them, but they don't have kind of authority within a house to make those kinds of on-the-ground decisions. They're there to support the people who are doing that decision making. The next level would be what are called kind of a lot of places sober homes, sober living home. And Bree mentioned this earlier, that in Washington State we do these definitions a little differently than other places. But when we're talking about sober living homes, level 2, we're generally talking about a home that's owned by somebody or owned by an organization that controls the policies of the home, but don't staff the home in a kind of a traditional way. By that I mean that there's not a staff member who lives there. There's not a staff member who is kind of running the show in the home. These are folks who again, maybe they probably have other work that they do, or they're an agency somewhere, and they have maybe a house manager who lives in the house. So that's kind of the level of staffing they have. Maybe it's a head resident or something like that, or somebody's brother who just decides to, who's willing to sort of uphold the policies of essentially the landlord or the operator. And in those homes, those folks, generally speaking, the rent gets paid, and the rent generally funds the home. So that's what we would call kind of a lower level 2 home. In Washington, the next level, what we would call level 3 in the rest of the country, also fits under level 2. So I'm confusing you a little bit here, but I want to define it separately because I think over time this is going to shift. But so level 3 homes have more staffing. There generally is some life skills kind of work that happens there. There are folks who have other kinds of responsibilities that are supervisory. Generally, decisions about who gets in and who has to leave a house are made by that staff person. Generally, there's a staff person who offices in the house, that kind of thing. So higher level of care. In Washington, level 2 and level 3 homes are both combined under level 2. But I make that distinction here because I want you to know that over time, I think that's going to shift. So level 3 in the traditional NARR model, level 3 homes are again staffed, and they offer what I would call the big difference would be a program, right? But in terms of staffing, there's somebody who really is on the ground doing recovery work with the folks who live in the home. Level 4 homes then, we'll go back and talk about a couple other distinctions, but level 4 homes then are what we would call inpatient treatment. And inpatient treatment where medication is dispensed, as opposed to the model we talked about before, where we might store medication for a resident, but they're getting their own. Medication is dispensed, clinical services are offered, people who work in the home are licensed, and generally speaking, the length of stay is pretty short because it's very expensive to run an inpatient treatment program. So not all inpatients are level 4, but all level 4 homes are inpatient treatment, if that makes sense. So there are some places that we would say, wow, that's a very clinical kind of model. It's not a recovery home in that there's not really a lot of peer support going on there. And so for our purposes at WAQRR, that's a little bit academic because we only do accreditation for Washington State level 2 homes. So next slide, and we'll talk about a couple other distinctives. The next thing to think about is services. So all of the levels, of course, provide housing. Next. So they're beds, you sleep overnight, all of that. All of them are based on the social model. So as I just described, if there's a kind of home that's super clinical, like a hospital, those kinds of things, they're not social model homes because they don't have those components that we're talking about peer leadership and peer support, where they really are doing a lot of support of one another in the home. If that's not existing, then we can't call it a recovery residence. Next. Structured support. So you notice how we draw this line right down the middle of level 2 in Washington. So structured support here starts in the middle of level 2, but that just basically means that there's a staff person. There really is a discernible program in the home. So high level 2, level 3, and level 4 homes obviously all have structured support for residents. The next, life skills. Again, I probably should draw that line in the middle of level 2 as well, because usually that staff person who's hired by the organization brings in a level of life skills training and equipping of residents. So this could be anything from budget management to conflict resolution skills to job prep skills, resume writing, seeking other housing, all of those kinds of things. How do you tell your story in a way that sells you to an employer, or, so a lot of kind of things. This is where a lot of kind of programs who really focus on recovery, how to live life in recovery, really thrive in this area. And so a lot of that stuff in a what I call lower level 2 home happens outsourced in the community. So the home provides a really great residential environment from which a person would go and do those other things, maybe in mental health counseling and or outpatient treatment or other kind of support services in the community. And then finally, of course, is clinical. So that is again, in Washington, level 3 and level 4 homes are clinical. Here we just drew it under level 4 because surely in level 4 homes there's a lot of clinical work, licensed folks providing the care. And then one more category down here at the bottom is where a facility. I think a couple of you mentioned that you work for a facility, maybe an outpatient treatment program or other kind of program that figured out that, wow, our clients do better if they have safe and secure housing that is really supporting their recovery. And so those agencies will open up their own recovery housing, usually at level 2, because those support services are offered generally in the community and or in the treatment center, or the agency itself provides all of that wraparound for residents, but they need a safe environment for there to live. So usually that is kind of a level 2 level of support in the home, and then the rest of the support happens elsewhere. So next slide, I'll get levels of care questions here in just a second. But if there is capacity, this is the question I'll pose. If we had enough of homes at all levels, and I wish we did, we don't have enough in any of them, quite honestly. We just have a real lack of beds. But if there was enough, then how would we decide where to put somebody? All right, so let's go to the next slide. And this is fairly self-explanatory, but I just want to be really, really clear about this, that we really are talking about if you had the luxury of putting someone in the right level of care, where should they go? So let's go to just click to the next piece here. If a person has a lot of recovery capital, and we can do a whole webinar on recovery capital, but essentially those sort of resources that it takes to sustain long-term recovery, if they've been in recovery a long time, or have gained those in a previous time in recovery, then they could do pretty well at a level 1 house. If they have very little recovery capital, we wouldn't want to put them in level 2, level 3, level 4 home. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. So yeah, if they don't have a lot of recovery capital, we would want to put them in a higher level of care until they build that recovery capital to be able to get to a lower level of care. So, all right, the next sort of criteria we would use is the severity and complexity of a person's disorder. So this might have to do with the amount of trauma that they've experienced in the past, or maybe we'll talk about this in another category, but there's co-occurring disorders that make it really difficult for this person to stay in sobriety. And so they're going to really benefit by having a higher level of care for a longer period of time. Next is stages of development. So some folks really, because of their intellectual development or their or maybe they may be either developmentally delayed, or they may have a behavioral disorder or something like that, that just developmentally they really aren't at a place where they can function in a lower level of care. And so again, they may need to stay longer in a higher level of care. So we're paying attention to those kind of things at the intake process. All right, next. And then person-driven choice. You notice that this arrow is the same color all the way across. What we mean by that is, in a recovery residence, we have a very high value of residents having some say in their recovery. And it's important to say that some people may choose a very high level of care where their choice is day in and day out. There aren't a lot of those, but they've chosen to be there. So we don't really advocate for assigning people to a high level of care who don't choose to be there, because they generally are not going to do well. They're going to buck up against whatever that authority is that's in those locations. And so just to be clear that we really want people to have a lot of choice in where they go. And again, that rubs up against the challenge of not having enough spaces in all of these levels of care. So sometimes we'll take somebody into our home that has a lot of challenges, and we probably shouldn't, but there's no other place for that person to go. And so we try our best to work with them as best we can, in the hopes that we can get them some recovery capital and some other resources to be able to make that work. But it doesn't always work. And sometimes we'll take in, not as often, but sometimes we'll have to take in someone who doesn't need as much service as we have, because there's no place right now at the lower level of care for them to go. But as soon as there is, then we'll try to refer them on to those places. All right. And then finally, was with the reality I've been talking about all along, is that there's just not enough on any of these. I think I need to say too, when I'm talking about levels of care, that one isn't better than the other. A level 2 home isn't trying to be a level 3 home necessarily. A level 1 home, they're very happy. We need people at all levels. We need facilities at all levels of care here. So I think, go ahead to the next slide. I think that might be Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do this real quickly. Length of stay, of course, generally speaking, is much shorter at the higher level of care. And the next little distinctive is that accountability and supervision, of course, is higher at the higher level of care. And so people stay longer and have less supervision in a lower level of care. Program personalization is much higher in the lower level of care. So people have a lot more say in kind of what their own recovery program is going to look like in an Oxford house, say, as compared to an inpatient treatment program. All right. And then the secret sauce of everything we do in recovery residences is connection. And Bree quoted Johann Hari earlier, whose language we use a lot, that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, but connection. So we really strongly believe that the more connected we can, in any level of care, the more connected we can help a person be, the more likely they're going to be able to succeed in their recovery. All right. So I'm going to pass it on, I think, to Karen, who's going to talk about the NARR standards. But any questions about levels of care that I can answer real quickly before we dive into that? This is the interactive portion of the program, everybody.
Go
So
ahead,
if you have
Christina.
thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, we're trying to decide between level 2 and level 3 just due to like staffing requirements and things. So I'm just wondering, on the level 3 is 24-hour staffing required and on
No, not at all. No.
Okay.
That would be more like an inpatient treatment kind of scenario. So
Okay, so
let me just
sorry.
So let me just say that again, I'm going to use Washington state definitions here. So in Washington, level 3 homes are what are called recovery houses. And there's an RCW that very clearly defines what a recovery house is. And so that is going to have some clinical services and all of that. And then level 3 homes are eligible for Medicaid reimbursement for most of their services. So in Washington, generally speaking, if you're kind of on the line, you're probably a level 2 for now. And then if you want to take on more clinical services and so on, and really start looking more like an inpatient treatment facility, then you're dancing into the level 3 territory in Washington. As soon as you start offering clinical services in the house, that's where you're crossing the line. So our best advice is to be really careful about doing that, because you have to be licensed to offer clinical services. So in Washington, you have to be licensed to be a level 3. And I know I'm confusing things by sort of telling you what it's like in the rest of the country, but I think we're working toward here in Washington a better understanding of what the difference is between level 2 and level 3. But my guess is if you're on the line, you're probably going to be a level 2 for our purposes today.
Okay, and so we are like a behavioral health outpatient facility here.
Okay.
So we're hoping that our recovery house will be right here on the same property.
Great.
So services will be offered. And I know my boss is going to ask, so I'm just making sure.
Yeah, and my guess is
Medicaid reimbursement. I know that.
But is that going to happen? I mean, this is the distinction, right? Are those services going to be offered at your outpatient facility, or are you going to have clinicians in the house doing work in the house that's kind of licensed work?
Oh, okay. Yep.
That makes sense.
Walk to the outpatient office, I'm sure.
Right. So then you're going to have a level 2 home that's providing all that kind of residential support for those services that you're doing at your outpatient place. That makes you a level 2 home.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
And Christina, one other facet. I had heard you mentioned that you guys are currently a behavioral health agency license, hold a behavioral health agency license. Is that I'm assuming that's for outpatient services, or is that for inpatient?
Outpatient.
Okay, so another thing to take into account, that if you wanted to do that, and you wanted to do that in Department of Health licensing language, that would be considered, your home would then be considered a scattered site location. But if you were considering dancing there, that would actually take an RTF, which is a residential treatment facility license, through the Department of Health. So it would in order to be to be able to provide that level 3 housing that Alan spoke of, you would have to reapply to the DOH for your RTF license. And again, as Alan touched on, we have such very few of them in Washington state now, but anyone that is doing that usually has that they always have the residential treatment facility side of things that's attached to it.
Okay, well, I'm not a good dancer, so I probably shouldn't dance around with that.
Well, yes.
Okay.
So you have the advantage of having clinical services and all that all bound up in your, in the other facilities. So you're better off saying, hey, we're not going to get a house licensed. We're going to get certified or accredited by WAQRR just to be sure we're doing good work, but we're not going to you don't need the Department of Health stamp on your house because you've got it on your treatment facility. So
perfect. Thank you, guys.
You bet.
Fernanda.
Okay, hey, I think you guys just answered the question. Just want to make sure I'm clear. So we met a gentleman yesterday. He and his mom are nurse practitioners, and he made us the offer that he advised that he provides, pretty much primary care services, medical, dental, whatever, and that they could actually come into our house and offer those services to our residents. So it sounds like we would still be level 2, and those would be like outpatient services. Is that correct?
yeah, so that person is operating under their license outside of your house, and you're just a house call for them.
Got it.
I think that's really important to be clear about that. So you're a house call for them as opposed to you being the offerer of those. So if that person were your employee, it'd be a different ball of wax.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question though. Really good clarifying.
Yeah, that's Fernanda. That's an amazing what we'll call a resource that any of the recovery residence operators could have. I mean, it's just a great resource. If you've got someone willing to come in from another licensed agency outside of yours to help you with those, whether they're life skills classes or whether they're medical classes, I'm sorry, medical services, or whether they're addiction medicine services. All the more people that you've got to make a robust program that are willing to come inside of your home, that doesn't at all change. You can still remain a level 2 home and have those individuals come in and provide those services.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Any other questions for Alan?
Right. I'll sign off then. I'll let you take over, Karen.
Okay. And if you need to stand up, jump around, shake your feet, anything, anybody, we're getting close to the lunch hour. We're going to get you there, but we're going to jump through these quality standards. I know this, when we started to think about opening a home, I look at those quality standards and I was like, wow, there's a lot of information there. But the further I went through it, that quality standards were such a great roadmap for me to follow to open a home. So I hope that you guys can use those as you are opening your home and realize just how valuable those are. We're not going to go through every single standard, but I'm going to go through what the core principles are and kind of the gist behind that. So one of the core standards is to operate with integrity. And that seems like that should be pretty straightforward what that means to operate with integrity. But when you break it down, are you serving people that are in recovery from substance use disorder? Are you following a mission that fits with that? Are you following legal practices? Do you have insurance? Do you have liability insurance, which is necessary? What does your city require of you, your county, a neighborhood that you might be in? Make sure that you're following best business practices. And that really helps all of us as recovery residence operators to put a beautiful face on recovery residences. Another part of that operating with integrity is keeping a distance between yourself and residents in terms of financial affairs. You don't want to get caught up in their financial affairs. Obviously, they are going to have expenses with living in the house, but we don't want to mix those in a way that is kind of unprofessional. it helps you guys. WAQRR has a great code of ethics that you will sign as being a operator of a home, and that breaks down some of the stuff in there specifically. But one of the examples too, you guys, is how do you market your place? If I have a brochure and I say I offer X, Y, and Z services, well, then I really should be offering X, Y, and Z services. Or your website, does your website present you in a way that is authentic to who you actually are and what you offer? So just make sure that you're doing that. So that's what it means to operate with integrity. The next core principle is to uphold your resident rights. You want to make sure when residents enter your home, they are super clear as to what the expectations of them are, what their rights are when they come into your house. And how you do that will depend on the way that you're going to run your program. Is that going to be part of your intake where you go through and you make sure that they understand exactly all the rights that they have living in your home, but also what the expectations are? I think we don't want to set people up for failure. And so if we can make sure that that's really clear for people, then that helps them in the process. Also making sure that they understand if the grievance policy, WAQRR has a grievance policy on their website. If somebody needed to access that, if they had an issue, you may, as an organization, choose to have an in-house grievance policy, and you would want to make sure that your residents were also aware of that. And also under resident rights, you want to make sure that you're protecting the confidentiality of the residents in your home. You don't want to be sharing with everybody around town about what's happening in your home or what's happening with your residents. That's really important that they feel protected and safe. And the next thing there, to create a culture of empowerment. I love this. We want our residents in WAQRR homes to feel like they have a stake. They have a stake in the house. They have a stake in the way it's governed, in the leadership. They have a say. They have an ability to have some input on applicants, potential new residents. They may help create some of the rules. I'll say for us personally, we've been open just over 3 years, and we had a resident come to us with an idea of something that we hadn't implemented, and it was a great idea, and it was something that we implemented in our house, and that gives them some ownership, some stake in the house and what they're doing and in their recovery. So that's really important. So just make sure that you're functioning in a way that encourages them to take ownership. And part of that taking ownership is, how long do they want to live in your house? Do they want to stay for a longer period of time? A shorter period of time? You're going to work with them as to what it is that they want to have as part of their recovery. Another thing there, and this is something we recently implemented, it's important to celebrate your residents, and I think that's a part of empowerment. And we've always just kind of hosted a party. When somebody has a sober a date or something like that, an anniversary, we will host some kind of a party. And then we started thinking, well, wait a second, maybe not everybody likes to be celebrated in the same way. So we've started asking in our intake process, hey, how do you like to be celebrated? So it gives them some of their own agency and ownership of themselves and what is important to them. So another way to help create empowerment within the residents. The next one there, develop staff ability to apply the social model. We want to promote healthy living and recovery behaviors. And I really believe that starts as a top-down model, not just people working direct client services. I feel like from every level, from top down, we want to make sure that we are treating people with respect. We have good, healthy communication skills. We have self-care that we do for ourselves as well as for our residents. We are setting healthy boundaries. And so those are all really good examples of staff teaching really good recovery behaviors. we are not perfect as humans. And so we do not always get that right. And so I think too, part of that teaching healthy recovery behaviors is having some humility as staff to be able to know when we might need to apologize for things, where we maybe need to adjust something. And I think that's a big part of recovery behavior, is knowing that we're not perfect and not having all the answers. I think both Bree and Alan talked about just that connection. So much of what we do in that social model is wanting to create that connection. So what can we do as providers to help make people feel safe so that they can connect with other people? I think that's super important. Next is to provide a home-like environment. Oh, wait, you know what? I forgot one more thing on the social model. Let's go back there. One of the other things that's part of that is making sure that we're culturally responsive and competent. And here's the thing with that. We may need training. I utilize, WAQRR has some really great trainings, webinars that they've done on being more culturally competent. How do we serve people of color? How do we serve people who are LGBTQIA? How are we aware of things that we do in our home that is culturally competent? And again, I would just say dig into as much training as possible so that you can learn and become better. And the other thing is ask questions. If you have a resident in your home who, that may have a different cultural background, be open and honest. And I think that's a great way to develop that social model better. Provide a home-like environment. It's not an institution. We want WAQRR homes need to be like a home. And that partially is because we want people to feel like they're in a home and not an institution. It needs to be comfortable. It needs to provide space. When you go through the quality standards, it's going to list out specifically what is required. Do people have space to store their items? Do people have space if they need to store something in a lockbox? Do they have that? Like somebody mentioned about MAT services, do they have a lockbox that they can keep stuff in? Do they have enough space? Is there a place in the home where people can gather together? And that gathering together provides that community and that connection that we keep going back to, which is the opposite, of addiction, is that connection for people. So making sure that it's a home-like environment. I have probably the best, one of my previous residents told me that she felt like she was living at grandma's house in my house. And we do have a floral couch, and I think that might have been part of it, but honestly, that was a great thing, because that to me made me feel like she feels safe in this home, and you want a place where you want your residents to feel safe in that environment. The next thing there is to provide a safe and healthy environment, which we talked a little bit about that, kind of that emotional safety, but you are providing a substance-free, no alcohol or other illicit drug use in your home. And that's just so you know, that's a great thing to share with a landlord. If you are renting a place, hey, you've got a home that's going to be a substance-free home, and that's a great thing. That you are providing some type of drug screen or UAs to make sure that you have a home that is substance-free. You also have plans for emergencies, and that can be all sorts of things when you start thinking about it. Fire, what are you doing in the case of a fire? Can you run fire drills in your house randomly? Do you have Narcan in the house, and is it available? Does all the residents, are they aware of where the Narcan is? And if they are aware of where it is, do they know how to use it? If the power went out at the house, what would the residents do? Have some things in place for those type of things so that people know what to do in that case. And some of this, will show up over time. We had a power outage and I didn't have enough flashlights or anything like that in the house. And so it's an opportunity to just think about those things ahead of time of what might happen at your house in terms of health and safety that you would have something in prepared for, and that you would do that for your residents. So like fire safety, you're going to have to make sure that you have fire ladders if you have second level, that you have the egress windows, that type of thing. Your house needs to be really safe for your residents. Also, make sure that you're maintaining smoke alarms, your electrical system, all those type of things, so that it is well, just well taken care of. Facilitate active recovery and community involvement. We really want to promote a life with meaning, and that's going to look different for different residents, what that life with meaning might look like. For some, it might mean they're going back to school. Some maybe it's a job. Some may be volunteer services in the community. It can look lots of different ways, and that's okay, because people are going to have different recovery journeys. Are they connecting with recovery support groups? We're going to want to make sure that we can share those things with them. And I think it was Fernanda may have been the one that asked about different community supports. I really look at your recovery residence as kind of like the hub of a wheel, and you've got all these spokes going out to different resources. You don't have to provide all the resources in your home. If somebody in your community is providing a great resource, then that is such an excellent opportunity to connect your residents with those resources, and not have to bring it in-house. I think it just takes time to find all those resources in your community. Continue to just reach out to people. And when you reach out to one, they may give you an idea of other ones. So if you can share all those resources to your residents in the house, that is such a great way to continue to help build their recovery capital. So they're connected not just to you now, when they do end up leaving your home, they're connected to other resources in the community. And that's really valuable. Let me see if there's anything else with that. Oh, the other thing too with that, with the recovery community, is you want your residents to participate in their recovery plan. How does their recovery plan look? Does that mean, like I said, going to school? Does that mean certain types of recovery support groups? And that's not just while they're in your house, that's for their future. So give them, help them connect and find what they see their future unfolding like, and see how they see their recovery journey developing over time. The next one is a model pro-social behaviors. We want to cultivate really a sense of belonging. And so what does that mean, to cultivate a sense of belonging and be responsible to the community? Really, we want to practice empathy and compassion, and we want to model that as an organization. Your staff and as an organization, you want to make sure that you're modeling that. Again, it goes back to that creating that safety, and which creates connection, because they feel like there's compassion and there's empathy around the way that they're managed in the home. There's a term, and I'm sure most of you have heard, this trauma-informed care. And if you haven't, there's some really great resources out there. I know WAQRR has a training on trauma-informed care, but understanding the trauma-informed care really recognizes the widespread impact of trauma on people, and taking that into account when you are working with your residents, and just the way that you run your home, the residents. It just matters, because we continue to as we do that, we have this respectful environment that's going to foster communication and connection and relationship, which again is what we're all trying to focus on to help. We really want WAQRR homes want to be a safe place for residents to come, to heal and to recover, and to grow. And then the last one there is we want to be a good neighbor. And there's all different policies about noise and smoking and vehicles, but really just think about what you're going to do is this is an opportunity for you to connect with the neighbors. You'll be able to share with them who you are, what you're doing, what your recovery residence is. Alan gave me the great idea. He said, keep a list of the quality standards for WAQRR. And if anybody, if you wanted to, you could always share that with neighbors and like, you know, here's in order for us to be here, this is what we're following. Talk with your residents and have policies around what your quiet hours are. And I think of that too, you guys, not just as you're outside of your home, but within your home, so that your residents are feeling respected in terms of quiet hours for each other. With smoking, make sure that, you know, you've got a place for residents to smoke, and it's maybe not out front and in center and in somebody's yard next door or anything like that. I think most of those are pretty straightforward and pretty easy. About parking, you know, where are your residents allowed to park? Where are they not allowed to park? Making those things, again, like we talked about before, where residents understand what is expected of them, being as detailed as possible as to what is expected of them. Hey, you can park your car here, you can't park your car here. It's going to help. It's going to save a lot of hassle. Being a good neighbor, I think this is a great opportunity to continue to put a positive face on recovery in your community. What you present with your home, with how you deal with neighbors, how you deal with the community, speaks volumes. So really think about how you do that and how you present your home. So that's the core principles. Do we have questions? Yep, go for it, Fernanda.
So on that last piece where you were speaking in terms of sharing like your list of quality standards with your neighbors and things, are you suggesting that we proactively let folks know that we have a recovery home, or is this, or just be ready if they should approach us?
I'm going to give my answer, but I'm going to be curious to see what Jason says. I believe that you should be proactive about that. Letting people know, hey, go meet your neighbors, you know, be proactive, be friendly. Like, hey, we're going to be moving in here. I just want you to know this is who we are and this is what we do. That's what I would do. Jason, are you going to tell me no?
No, absolutely not. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. NIMBYism, not in my backyard, is alive and well in the communities, all of the communities that we live in. Most of NIMBYism is based on lack of education and fear. If neighbors get the feeling that people are trying to sneak something into their neighborhood, their mind automatically goes to, you're trying to sneak something into my neighborhood, and therefore you're trying to hide something. It goes a heck of a long way with when neighbors are outside. What I like to do when I'm setting up a house and neighbors are outside, I just walk up to them. Hey, I'm Jason, and I want to share a little bit with you about the home that I purchased and why I purchased it. You know, we're here to help individuals get back on track and be productive parts of society. Have an open house. Invite the neighbors to be able to come up, walk through the home, take a tour of the home. But yeah, 100%, Karen, you and I are on the same page. Like they say, an ounce of prevention goes a heck of a long way, you know.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and Fernanda, you could even like do the open, like we did an open house too, which was great, but you could even be really strategic about your open house and invite specific people. I have invited my my county commissioners to come through my house. I have invited my ER doctors to come through my house. I have invited any other agency. I've talked with the fire department, the police department. I mean, anything that I could think. I want to show you guys what we're doing because we are doing something really great here, but also then they're connected with you. And I'm pretty much, I am happy to ask for advice. And when they're in the house and say, hey, do you have any thoughts or any ideas of how we might be able to work together or support each other? Hey, how can we support you as we're running this house? It's just going to build your
credibility.
credibility,
Yeah.
within the community.
Yeah.
And
I
even
like
think outside the box, even like somebody you might not necessarily think to have come through your house. Like I invited our city manager, which was great. She loved it, and she's been a big support of us since then. And I wouldn't necessarily have thought to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, I had a question.
Yeah.
I've probably been watching too many videos from different people like that had recovery homes, but like some of the mixed things that I was hearing is that some people would say like they put the address of their home on their website, but then some people were advising against because of experiences they had had. But then also they talked about, you know, interviewing people who they wanted to consider for the home. And somebody had an experience where they said that they no longer actually interview applicants inside of the home because I think something happened where the person wasn't accepted and there was some vandalism to their house. But, you know, I'm sure there can be good and bad experiences, but I just kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts were on those ideas.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we do, and then Jason can give you what he does. We don't actually list our address on our website. And people often say to me, there's no sign in your yard. I didn't know that this was a recovery. And I'm like, you're right. There is no sign in my yard. I want it to be like a home, like a residential home. We do interview in our home. We have not had any problems with any vandalism or anything else with that. So that hasn't been an issue for us. And I don't know if maybe Jason has, or if anybody else, if Jeff, I know you're on here and you run homes too. But we do interview in our home because we like to interview in person. I think it helps because I think sometimes you get a different feel from somebody versus being on the phone. If we can. Sometimes you can't always interview in person because they may be in jail or they may be in treatment or whatever. But Jason, do you have some input on that?
Yeah, I've seen individuals go both directions with that. Recovery residence operators. It's always my suggestion. Sure, you can put pictures of your beautiful homes up on the website, but just to protect your residents that are living there, I would just limit it to the city and state in which it is. I've seen it go both ways. I've seen individuals do phone interviews. I've seen interviews being done over Zoom, and I've also seen when the opportunity presents for individuals to be able to come directly over to the house. I guess I'm not tied to one method or the other. That's just going to be whichever way your organization chooses to go. Definitely we want to keep it like a home-like environment. It's one of our quality standards, and in one of the things that's very, very important to us. I always encourage individuals not to put a sign up in the front yard. For a couple different reasons. One, you're protecting the individuals over there, and the minute that you place a sign up in your front yard that says, hey, we are recovery residents XYZ, Now you are changing the classification of your home that can be interpreted by some of the city and county code enforcement places as an actual family home that you're renting to individuals, to actually a boarding home or a business. So again, the big things that we're trying to push: a home like environment in great neighborhoods for individuals. And even though we are serving a subset of individuals that are in recovery, really at the end of the day, there's no difference with your recovery residents and the individuals that you have there that that you're allowing to stay in the home, than if you were renting the home to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, just as a regular investment property. So again, something I would just keep in mind when you're renting the home out. It's and again, this can be used when you're going to approach individuals, your neighbors. Hey, we bought this home because we have a heart. We want to help individuals. These individuals that are going to be living in our home, we're going to be providing them with some resources. We're going to be providing them with services, and we're going to be around. We're going to be monitoring them. Should anything at all come up, I want to be sure that you have my name, that you have my phone number, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time. We are 100% an abstinence-based program. So with that, one of the assurances that you can get with my tenants, one of the things I can guarantee you is it's going to be the only home on this block where individuals guaranteed to be clean and sober. So just good stuff and good talking points that you can use when opening your residence.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
And Angelo, you get to decide what's right for you and your community and where you live and your environment, and you'll navigate it to be a good fit for you as long as we're following the core principles. It can vary. Yeah. Anybody else? Everybody's hungry for lunch. Okay, we're going to take a lunch break. We are going to meet back here at 1 o'clock because we're close enough to close enough to 12. So we will see you guys back at 1. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, I'm going to be signing off. I will not be able to rejoin this afternoon, but I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day today to join us and be part of this wonderful conversation. As always, from WAQRR, myself and my team.
Yeah. Did anyone have any questions that came up before we dive in to some open discussion about? Go to the next slide. Well, oh, I see something in the chat. Let's see. So we don't have any Rose, any like completion certificates or anything, but we send out the slides as well as the recording can be sent out to you via email at the email that you registered. Yeah.
All right. Anything else from this morning? We can dive in. Otherwise, we can dive into these topics.
I had a question.
Sure.
And please let me know if it's kind of off topic. But I guess you can get like a request of like an ROI. I think we're supposed to be making sure that the occupants are continuing with their treatment, whether it's behavioral therapy or group sessions or but do we have to can we do that through an app, or is that something where we have to check up periodically with the clinic, or would that be like the house manager doing something like that? Like, how do you ensure that they're actually, continuing with their treatment plans?
You want me to do this, Bree, or?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So it really totally depends on the requirements of your program. So your program may or may not require that people do outpatient treatment. That's up to you. So I think you have a lot of latitude. So our umbrella is really big in terms of certification. So we want to make sure you're hitting the basics. Whether they go to outpatient treatment or not may or may not be something that's a component of your program. So if you decide, hey, in order to live here, you need to, and my suggestion would be, if you do something like that, it would be that that residents would be required to do an assessment, an SUD assessment, and then that they follow the prescription of the assessment or the recommendation of the assessment. So that's the way we do it in our program. So if you're coming to New Earth Recovery, you need to know that we're going to ask you to do an SUD assessment. And then if it says that outpatient treatment is warranted, we're going to expect that you go to outpatient treatment. So now to your question, as to whether they're going or not, we've had some providers who are willing to send us progress reports. We do ask our residents for ROIs, or that they fill out ROIs for us for all of their agencies, so that we can, if we suspect that I don't know that that's going well, that could be a house manager or in our case a staff person that could just follow up with the agency to say, how has so and so been doing on attending treatment, and then they would let you know in accordance with the ROI that the resident has with them. So that would be the way to do it. And then but again, it just totally depends on whether you're requiring that or not. Some programs, it's optional. Like, okay, it's your recovery, you figure out what you need to do, and in that case, then there's not a lot of accountability that would be required. But
okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? All right, we'll have other times, especially we're going to go into some more open kinds of conversations. And so if we kind of remind you of something that's been on your mind, you can feel free to circle back to it, and we'll be a little bit more free associating some this afternoon in some of these topics. So we gathered a few topics together that we know come up. They come up fairly regularly. So we wanted to speak to them just in terms of some things that we've learned over time about these topics. This is just to kind of prime the pump. So we'll get started with these, but if there are things that you all have on your mind in terms of policy kinds of questions, or just anything that's going on or that you anticipate in houses that you haven't even opened yet, glad to field those kinds of questions as well. So the three things that just come up fairly regularly in these conversations that we think are worth speaking about are on the screen there. And I think I'll share this with Karen. Karen and I will sort of handle these, but I'll jump in on NIMBYism, and then Karen, if you want to throw something else in the mix, we really welcome that. So NIMBYism, in case that's a new term for you, it's pretty common circulation, but NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. The idea being that there are some folks who may claim to be about supporting people in recovery and be all about it, but they basically are saying, but do that somewhere else. Don't want it in my neighborhood. So this gets a little bit back to the conversation we had earlier in the day about about our right to exist as recovery residences and our right to exist pretty much where we want. There are certainly some cities, jurisdictions can put some sort of restriction around that, but it's pretty narrow what they can do and say. But again, we typically want to work with jurisdictions and with neighborhoods as opposed to sort of setting up any kind of adversarial relationship from the beginning. Tell you a brief story. Jason mentioned this morning. We had a would-be operator in a municipality who opened or was bought a house. Neighbors are always nibby about who bought that house, and so they checked in, and it was the name of his LLC, and it had something in there about recovery, and so this person's so neighbors got really in an uproar, and they said, well, we can't have people in recovery here. They were a very what I would sort of call a kind of a closed, sort of insular community, and they felt like people in recovery were going to bring drugs into their neighborhood and be a danger to their kids, and you hear all kinds of things like that. and in this particular case, they were really hostile toward him, and I think it kind of raised some fear in him, and he was it kind of resulted in him being a little bit standoffish about wanting to engage with them because it was pretty traumatic. And so he was really careful about when and where he engaged with them, and the result of that ended up being, and again, not blaming him at all for this, but that they just felt like, oh, this is a person who's uncooperative and doesn't want to answer our questions and is being evasive, et cetera, which I don't believe is true at all. But his sort of lack of engagement led to kind of more mistrust, and it became a thing. His the city council got involved at the behest of the neighbors and created a very quick ordinance, and it had to do with with opening up certain kinds of group homes in the vicinity of schools. This one happened to be fairly close to a school, and just created, and so the city council created this ordinance very quickly. It was an illegal ordinance. They really just didn't do their research in kind of putting it together. It was a clear violation of the Fair Housing Act. And so we got involved, and first sort of had an attorney friend of ours write a letter just letting them know kind of where they had gone astray, and the city council came back and rescinded their ordinance, but the neighbors were still very, very hostile, and so still ended up not deciding not to open a residence there. And I haven't checked lately to see kind of where they're at, but it was a situation where our advice was, boy, would you want to put residents in a situation where neighbors are going to be from the outset really, really hostile toward their presence and act out accordingly. And so we worked really closely. We went to the city council meeting, brought a group of people who were supportive of people in recovery, and kind of just sort of dispelled some myths, to talk about, hey, just because somebody has a background of addiction, and they may even have a background, a criminal background, doesn't mean that they're dangerous, especially to kids. And it doesn't mean that they're gonna use drugs in your neighborhood or any of that. It might, in fact, we're the only house in your neighborhood that you can guarantee is clean and sober. Where there are consequences for doing something different. And so anyway, we think, and then we ended up staying about an hour after the meeting talking to those concerned neighbors, and I think did some trust building with them, but didn't quite get to the place where they were ready to change their kind of attitude. So really was a difficult situation. Recently, we opened another house. Our residents just moved in 2 days ago to the house that we just opened in town here. It's our 6th one, and residents immediately. It's kind of funny. Resident came to the door. I'm sorry, not a resident. A neighbor came to the door while we were doing some work in there, and said, and I'm kind of prepared because neighbors have questions, and so I was polite at the door, and we talked, and she said, I'm a neighbor and I'm scared to death. I said, oh no, okay, here we go. What can I help you with? And what can I'd be glad to explain anything I can about what we're doing. And she said, are you opening a daycare here? And I said, no, we're not opening a daycare. She says, oh, great, fantastic. Really glad to hear that. Thanks so much. Just can't stand all that noise of those kids. And ultimately, we told her what we were doing. It turns out she's a former law enforcement member of law enforcement, and retired, and has a real heart for people in recovery, and was thrilled to death to see people in recovery getting a second chance and living right in her neighborhood where she could be helpful. Residents moved in on Tuesday of this week. Then the very next day, she and her husband came over with a big plate of cookies, and got to know each of the guys by name, and invited them to a barbecue next week at their house. And so that's the kind of neighborhood relationships we want. In the meantime, there are some other neighbors in the same neighborhood who are a little more skittish and are a little concerned because there are daycares in the neighborhood, and they're a little concerned about that. And so they've had some questions, which the neighbor has helped to quell. And we have gone to our city council meeting here in town to answer questions that our city council had about our houses and how they work and the accountability that our residents have and so on. And anyway, so we strongly encourage you to do everything you can to make those relationships and to be proactive about making those relationships, and to have policies in place that make your residents look like the nicest looking place in town or in the neighborhood. That you have policies around smoking and around noise and around parking, all those things that could be a problem in a neighborhood. Anything you can do to address those things in advance. And if neighbors asked about them, let them know here are our policies. And if you have a concern about anything that's going on in our house, here's my card, please call. And I would be more than happy to address those things with you. And here's a number you can call at night if you need to. If there's something going on that we should know about, please let us know. So a couple examples of sort of NIMBYism at work, and maybe a couple different responses and ways that that we just encourage you to actively be engaged. I didn't intend to do all that much storytelling, but they just started coming, so I wanted to share them with you. Karen, do you have anything you want to add about being a good neighbor in neighborhoods and
you know, I think that we hit on this at the end of the core principles. We spent some time and there were some questions around it. So I think we hit on a bit of it already, unless people have further questions.
Okay, great.
So Alan, this is Fernanda. I was just wondering, are you able to share the community that for the first story so we can stay away from it? I don't know if that's an issue or not.
Way up north in the state.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just hesitant because I don't want yeah,
Okay.
I don't want to besmirch any people in particular,
Sure.
but kind of a
Okay.
small town that really is just kind of known to be sort of insular, and they're pretty yeah. So but
Okay.
but the interesting thing, which I didn't tell them or their city council, but that there are a number of recovery homes operating in their town
Already.
that they don't know about and that are doing fine. Thank you very much. A couple Oxfords and a couple other independents. So I didn't want to ruin it for them.
Right,
but
right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
But
I like to say, Alan, and I said this before, that this is such a great opportunity for us to continue to break down the stigma around addiction and recovery. So when we put great houses and do good work in neighborhoods, it makes a huge difference. So yeah.
I have an elevator speech that I give to city councils and so on. And the basic idea is that, if you are a person who really wants to see people recover and have a really heart for people in recovery, then you want to support recovery housing. If you're a citizen and you don't really care as much about that, but you care about your tax dollars, you should support recovery housing. And that our residents, instead of using resources that are being paid for and being incarcerated over and over again and being hospitalized over and over again and going to inpatient treatment over and over again, which are very expensive interventions, instead of doing those things, our folks are paying taxes because they're working. They are no longer a burden on the system. People in recovery volunteer at twice the rate as people as the regular population, the rest of us. And so I spend some time talking about how important it is. We're not only and this is a big deal, that we're saving people's lives, but we're also returning people back to society who are contributors instead of people who are taking from the system. So if all your interest is economic, there's still plenty of really good reasons to support really good aftercare. Anyway, that's the elevator speech. There's a longer version if you ever want to hear it. But the big idea is we want people, regardless of kind of where you stand on supporting people in recovery, there are really good reasons to support recovery housing. And that I usually do some version of that talk in those settings to help people and neighbors and others understand that the extent to which a community welcomes a person back into recovery has everything to do with whether that person is going to succeed or not. And so if we want to keep ostracizing them and keep treating them like pariahs and outsiders, then they'll keep using our systems because they won't be able to reintegrate back in and become contributors. So Look at that. I gave the speech anyway. So, okay. Thanks. Let's move on to the next topic, and you can always come back if you want to, but co-occurring challenges. What we want to talk about here is just the understanding, and I think probably most folks on this call know this, but people in recovery from substance use disorders almost always have some sort of co-occurring challenge, mental health challenge. And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, right? Either they have been using drugs and alcohol long enough that it has affected their mental health, or a mental health condition has led people to sort of self-medication and in order to make life work for them. And because of that, those things are intermixed. But they're almost always intermixed, and some people get diagnosed with mental health disorders because they're using drugs. So it turns out when you're using a particular cocktail of illicit substances, your behavior is going to look a lot like bipolar disorder, and so you're going to get that diagnosis. And so there's just a lot of kind of misunderstanding out there in the community about this. And so what we found over time is, the longer a person lives in residence and does recovery, the more we're able to sort of suss out, and we're not doctors, we're not trying to be physicians, but the more we're able to help them figure out for them what is kind of related to my using, and what is it that I need to work on over here, either with medication and or therapy and or other kind of behavioral interventions that help me kind of live a regular life apart from substances. So really separating those two things out is almost always an ongoing challenge and opportunity for somebody in early recovery and beyond, and later on in recovery as well. And so if you're getting into this line of work to really help people with substance use disorders, it behooves you to, again, not that you're going to become a therapist or a doctor or a prescriber, but to know some things about mental health so that you can at least be supportive of people who are going through the process of sort of separating out those two things and figuring out which is which, and figuring out how to make the new normal work for them. And I would welcome, I think we have a physician on the call, and I'm not to put anyone on the spot, but if anyone has anything to kind of add to that in terms of wisdom about mental health challenges as they kind of connect to substance use disorder recovery, be more than open to hear any wisdom that you have on that. Questions, comments? I can talk a little bit more about kind of on the ground what we do, but I will do that. But anything come up for you as we bring up this topic?
Alan, I just want to throw in that when residents are coming to your home, you want to make sure that they're the right fit for you, but you're also the right fit for them. So I think it's important that we don't set anybody up for failure. If we have somebody who's applying to our home who may have real significant mental health needs that we can't support, and they maybe don't have connection to any other support, then you really think about whether or not you're the right place for them to come, because you got to think about the house as a whole. And I think that's important, and that's really hard. I know for me, it's really hard sometimes when somebody may have needs that we can't meet, and maybe their needs might put other residents at risk. Like I'll give an example. We had a resident recently who would leave the oven on, leave the burners on, was doing stuff that was making our house unsafe for other residents and didn't feel safe. And so we had to really take that into consideration and think about that. But and that had to do with not utilizing their medication and that type of thing. So just, it's a complicated situation. I feel like it's difficult, but just make sure you're doing what's right for your residents.
Yeah.
Hope that's okay, Alan. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really well said. So it gets back to the level of care conversation that we had before, right? That we really want to be sure that we have the level of care that a person needs who's coming to us. And some of that stuff you don't know till they get there. I'll tell you. I mean, you're depending on an application and an interview maybe to determine whether to let somebody in. We've had folks who have declared to us, hey, I've been diagnosed schizophrenic. And we say, okay, well, what are you doing for care for that? And they say, well, nothing, because I'm not taking any medication and I refuse to. We've turned those folks down. We've said, well, we understand you're certainly free to do that, and we're not making any kind of judgment about that. But in order to live here, if you have a diagnosis where a physician has recommended a course of treatment and you're not choosing to do that, we don't have the care that we're not going to be able to support you in that, because we've had, frankly, too many folks who are unmedicated with mental health conditions that have completely really been disruptive to the house environment. And frankly, it's really not safe for them either to not get the care that they need, or to not be under any care at all. And so that's a really hard spot to be in. It looks like there's a hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, it's Fernanda. So that's a good question. I mean, that's a good point. Brings me to a question that as a new operator, I was asked, and I don't know that I felt confident in my answer or response. So as a level 2 operator, what, for the folks on this call, what are you guys doing in terms of I don't know how to word it, the length of stay, or no, not the length of stay.
Previous
treatment.
Yes.
The amount of treatment that they've done before they come into your house. I don't know if I'm.
You're talking about substance use disorder treatment or mental health treatment?
Yes,
Substance
or
use disorder
either
treatment.
one, right?
Okay. I'm glad to throw it open to anybody who wants to answer. The question is just how much have they had before they come, and do you have any kind of guidelines about you'll accept or not?
I will say it is going to, like, I think Alan has said this with other things, it's really going to vary for the resident. Are they ready to come and do what is expected in your house, to follow what your expectations are in terms of recovery, whether or not they've been to treatment or not? I don't think for us, we don't require somebody to have been to treatment. And we also have people who've been to treatment 7 or 8 times. And so that isn't a big, we may have somebody apply and we feel like treatment might be good for them before they come to us. And we might encourage them, say, hey, we think it might be a good idea for you to get to treatment. We can try and hold a bed for you, that type of thing. We might do that, but there's no specific standard that there's not that we have.
I might modify that suggestion by saying I would ask them to get the assessment.
Yes.
And then to do what the assessment says, right? So if the assessment says, hey, you should go to inpatient treatment, we're going to say, we'd like you to go to inpatient treatment. We're going to save a bed for you. If you go to inpatient treatment, you've got a place to go when you come out. But the assessment says that, because what we don't want to have happen is for them to just fail, because they don't have the support that they need. They came too early,
Okay. So. And then the assessment that you speak of, is that just kind of a standard assessment, or is it something you've created?
Substance use disorder assessment that they get at usually an outpatient treatment facility, or somebody who's licensed to do that assessment.
Got it. Thank you.
Fernanda, you guys are in Yakima?
Yes. And CELA, yes.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you probably have something. I will say we're in a small community and assessments are really difficult for us to get for people. So I do think, connecting with what organizations in town are the ones who provide assessments and letting them know, hey, this is what we're going to be doing, and just making that connection ahead might be really good.
Got that. Perfect.
And it could be that there's one place to get an assessment, and that might be the place that offers outpatient treatment. We have to be really careful about requiring someone to go to a particular outpatient treatment program. We can't really do that, right? Because that starts to look like we're fixing things, or we're so patient brokering and all that kind of stuff. So we have to be really careful about that. But so giving them as many options as possible, but saying we do need you to have an assessment in order to do this. We have taken folks right out of detox before, but kind of begrudgingly. We're like, I don't know, because we don't want them to fail. We want them to have the structure around them that they need in order to get through those earliest days.
Right, right.
And this is just personal perspective, not from WAQRR, but my personal perspective about inpatient treatment is, and I don't want to offend anybody on the call, but nothing really magic happens in inpatient treatment, except there's just time that goes by that is in a very safe, structured environment where a person actually has the ability to assert kind of their logical brain over their limbic brain. Just the longer they're in that space, the better chance they have of doing recovery in the long run. So it's not that there's a magic wand or the teaching that happens in treatment is awesome. It really is just more about extending the detox period, right? So that they can get in the other phases of detox before they're, so that they're more ready to come to us, because we really want them to
Great.
succeed,
Great feedback. Thank you.
You bet. Anything else on this sort of dual diagnosis, co-occurring challenges question? Or again, or if you have wisdom about it, we're more than open to that as well. But this can be a real tough one. One person who is not doing well in their mental health can really destabilize an entire house. It can really trigger a lot of folks and can really make for a really difficult experience. That's not to say we shouldn't take risks and bring in people every once in a while, but just being aware that there's a cost sometimes to that admission. And the amazing thing is, I want to say on the other end that we have taken risks for some folks that we just wondered if it was going to work, and it has worked, and they're doing amazing, and they've come through it, and they're really thankful that we gave them a shot. And so it absolutely can work, but you've got to count the cost. So, all right. The next one is medication for opiate use disorder. So I have a feeling, a couple, 3 years ago, this topic was hotter than it is now. In that I think generally there's pretty good acceptance out there of medications. So we're talking about Vivitrol, naltrexone, or Suboxone in the middle, or methadone, kind of for the most severe cases. And if you're not familiar with those medications, it would be good for you to kind of go do a little bit of a refresher. There are we've done videos. You can go to our website and find some primers on those and past webinars that we've done. There are other resources that are far better than ours that can really take you into the, into the depths of how those medications work. But long story short, we really are of the opinion, and it is an opinion at this point. It's not settled law, but we are of the strong opinion that you really can't turn away somebody for using medications for opiate use disorder, that would violate their civil rights. And so we at present, the WAQRR policy is that we will still accredit somebody who doesn't accept folks on medication-assisted treatment because maybe they can't, don't feel like they can provide the level of support that they need. But my guess is before too long, there will be a case somewhere that will settle this, and it will become a matter of kind of civil rights and case law that says that you can't turn somebody away for using these medications. So that's kind of the legal side. The other piece of it is that, of course, some people really benefit hugely by being on medication. And it has made their recovery possible for them. And so we recognize that. And I personally can say from years of experience that it really that has been very helpful tool for a lot of our residents. I will also say, kind of on the other side of the coin, that it can present challenges, that if someone's medication isn't adjusted properly, they can sort of present symptoms that look like they're using drugs. So they can be nodding off in your house meeting, or they can look like they're high. And so the line that we draw is to say, we are not your doctor. We can't tell you how much of this medication to take or not. Glad that you have something that's working in your recovery. However, what we can speak to is the behavior. So if you're in a house meeting and you're nodding off, you need to make some sort of adjustment in your either it's medication or your sleep pattern or your lifestyle or something that makes it so that you're not nodding off and or yawning all of the time, falling asleep when we are trying to do a house activity where we need everybody fully present. So does that distinction make sense to everybody? I mean, we're not telling people what they can and can't take or how much they should or shouldn't be taking. That's outside of our lane. but we can say your behavior in our times together is a problem for the rest of the house, and we're going to ask you to do whatever you need to do to correct that behavior. Maybe I'll pause there for a minute, just see if anyone has thoughts. I don't want to overdo a topic if it feels like we all kind of have it in hand, but if you don't have anything, that's fine, but just want to make sure we get a chance to talk about it. So that being said, this is another area where we ask for an ROI from a provider, a prescriber, because we want to be on the team that's helping in that person's recovery. We want to be kind of a team together, and we have prescribers here in town who really enjoy that relationship, and we've developed it with them over time, and they really benefit by having kind of a more holistic set of inputs in a person's life, and we treat it like we're a team and we're working together for the health of the individual. Almost always, if we want to be in touch with the provider, we want the resident to be right in the middle of that. So we're not treating people like children or talking about them behind their back. We're engaging them in the conversation. But it might be something like, hey, could you talk to your provider next time about such and such? And if there's evidence that they haven't done that, or that's not getting through somehow, where they're not advocating strongly enough, then we may say, could we call the provider now, or could I come to your next appointment where we could just talk through what's going on the ground to maybe see if we can't help each other figure out a better way forward, something like that. So it's a little bit intrusive in some ways, and we kind of walk that line maybe, but it's all for the good of the resident and for their ability to kind of make life work in our house. And obviously, ultimately, for their ultimate good, that we're involved in those conversations. Again, their decisions with their physician, but we're affected by those decisions, and so we invite ourselves to that table.
Alan, this is Fernanda again, and this is going to sound silly, but I just want to make sure I understand. ROI, in this form means return on investment still?
Oh, I'm sorry. No. I shouldn't have used the acronym. Release of information.
Release of information. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, sorry. ROI means release of information. Yeah, appreciate the question. It's just a form that they would fill out at their provider that gives their provider permission to talk to us.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Very good.
Thanks for the clue in there, Karen. I just wasn't coming to me. So, all right. Other questions about this topic? Again, I don't want to overdo something, but I just want to make sure we're. So I guess I want to open it up now before we move on to the next piece in our agenda, but just to ask, are there other kinds of issues, questions, kind of current topics that you're wondering about, or maybe that you're encountering, those of you who are already operating homes, anything that you're wondering about, or if you anticipate something coming up that you're just curious about how we might handle that as operators? We're always glad to be resources for you along the way, and so feel free to reach out to Briana or Sarah, and we'll try to be helpful in any way we can. They'll usually connect you with a resource, or they both know a lot, and but we have this growing network of folks who are becoming more and more expert in this field because we're just doing it and we're learning as we go,
So it's Fernanda again. I'm sorry.
No problem. Go ahead.
I'm really close to the line. So these are things are popping up and things that I need to address. So any recommendations on identifying a house manager, or any recommendations on the best places to find them, for example, resources to find a good house manager?
I'm going to kick this to my friend Karen, who's been in this struggle.
You know how we've talked about, Fernanda, just networking? That is a big part of it. Reaching out to other organizations, people who are part of recovery support groups, just as much as you can. We really struggled when we tried to find ours to start with. So be patient with it, but just look under every rock you can to see what you might be able to find. And I think other people, that's what it was for us, was just connecting and getting that word out. So that's what worked for us. I don't know, Alan, if you'd have more than
what it is, most houses that we started without a manager. We had a group of residents and then a staff person who was just really more engaged at the beginning. I'll say this, it really matters the culture that you set up in your house.
Yeah.
And so anything you can do to be present to setting up that culture well. And if that means not having a house manager for a minute while you're working hard at setting up that culture, and then it just seems to that person you end up with kind of a resident who just wants to be a partner in that and is excited about it. And they just start to rise to the top and they start doing extra things, and it just becomes a natural kind of a fit. And so that's, I think it's better to not have a person than to have the wrong person, is what
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Really important.
Fernanda, don't ever apologize for asking questions. That is exactly what this is for. I was where you are when we started. I called Alan. He was on speed dial because you don't know what you don't know. Things are going to pop up, new things are going to happen, and they still do for us. I mean, they still do for me. Something will pop up. I'm like, we haven't addressed that before. So it's okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Because I know I ask a lot of questions. I'm that person who's not afraid to ask because I don't know and I need to know. So thank you.
Looks like Richard has a question.
Go ahead, Richard.
I do. And I guess it's taking several steps backwards, but nevertheless, it's something that's come up at our facility. And I've talked to others at Oxford House, the Rescue Mission, Sound House, other places, and see how they handle this. But I think there's probably a real wealth of experience and informational base here at this location. So yeah, when dealing with somebody who's a resident, and let's take alcohol for example. We had a relapse here a while back, and with this fellow, and it was a acute alcohol poisoning, and I ended up calling emergency medical tech, and they took him away and took him to the hospital. But the release was within about 12 to 15 hours, and so he was back at our facility. And we had things set up so that any relapse occurs, we have places that you would go to, and we already contacted them, make sure it was okay. But I'm going, the next step would be a medical detox, because within the next 72 hours, it could be very dangerous. So where I went Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, no one could get him in for another 10 days. And so we were left.
It's by definition, you won't need it in 10 days, right? I mean,
precisely. Yeah. The potentially lethal, neurophysiological condition that occurs within those, the next day or so is really what I was concerned about. And so I talked to people that said, oh yeah, well, we kicked them out right away. And I go, do you really? And they go, well, not really. We let them stay. So, it was a matter of, no, if we have no place they should be detoxing within our facility, and it's destabilizing to everybody. But no, we let them sleep it off till the next morning. I've heard all kinds of answers, and I was looking for a better strategy moving forward that would be protective of the resident, the stability of the house, and you get to the point going, well, they shouldn't have released him to the hospital in the first place. He drove back under the influence. It was a lot of things that piled on. I go, yeah, we really have to have a better understanding of how our legal responsibilities are, ethical, et cetera. So,
yeah. Well, a couple of things I'd say. One is to the extent that you planned ahead, that's really wise. And so everyone who's listening, who's getting into this, the wisdom here is have something ready to go, because this stuff always comes up in the middle of the night when you're not thinking really straight. And so anything that you can have kind of worked out ahead of time, those resources, those partnerships, all of that you can kind of line up, those places to go, any of that you can have ready to go at a moment's notice, that's what you want to have lined up so that you're not problem solving something for the first time when it comes up. There's no way you're going to think of every scenario, right? But that feels really important. The more you can have protocols for things at our organization, we call them our response repertoire, right? We want to have a really broad response repertoire. But I agree with you. The hospital shouldn't have released that person. So back to your scenario, I would be inclined to take a person back to the hospital and say, it is unsafe for this person to be in our home, and we are not taking responsibility for them. And there is no place for them to go. We are not a place that's willing to receive them and take on the liability of their, of where they are in their detox process. So that I guess I'd be inclined to make it the hospital's problem again. And to see what they say. I mean, it feels a little bit inhumane, but sometimes, and I've had to do this with mental health situations as well, when someone is at harm of or in danger of harming themselves, to say they don't have a place with us right now because they're in danger of harming themselves, and we can't take that. We don't have the care that they need. And I learned that trick while working in college residence halls. We had that come up a fair amount where we had to say, nope, they can't come back here. And then we make it the health. So then they start doing the assessment of, okay, if we release this person now, or we send them back to their car, or we send them to the cab or whatever, what's that? Is that possibly going to bounce? So they do some risk assessment, and that's exactly where it should be. If there's no other medical detox place, the hospital's it, right? So at least that's my thinking on the, with what you presented is, we have to be really careful about taking on something. We have, on occasion, not in the extreme that you're describing, where there's alcohol poisoning and that kind of high level of blood alcohol content. We have let someone sleep it off before, and then dealt with it very first thing in the morning, because it felt like that was the safest alternative. The only place to release that person was to the street, and we didn't feel good about that. We thought they could die. And so we took the risk, and we let other residents know, hey, this is a really hard situation. We're going to ask you guys to just keep a respectful distance, let this person be. And they really were sleeping. There wasn't drama going on, none of that. It was just this person really, they were going to sleep all night, and they did. And then of course we had an arrangement with our house manager, our house assistant, to call if anything was to change. Then we might have had to deal with it again. But we have done that on occasion. So there's some case by case kind of thinking you have to do as well, of course. And it's always weighing out values, right? The value of protecting the sort of sanctity of the home versus what's best for the person. Life and death is a pretty high value. And so that might trump some other things in an extreme. And it's a tough one. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point, so I'll turn it back over. Does that help at all, that sort of those considerations? If anyone else has anything you want to add to the scenario or throw in, and if you're trying to talk, you're muted at this point. Still, I can't hear you.
Yes, pretty much what you had indicated with respect to the hospital, saying, well, he's gotten past that point of acute poisoning, and he was stable. My wife works at Tacoma General, and it's part of the multi-care system, so I'm pretty familiar how they exit, people and discharge. And I'm going, okay. So I called them back. We really need medical detox at this point. We can't find any. They go, well, we can't take them back in. And so it was total resistance there for, So we first thing I did was get on site, talk to all the residents, and just like you said, people were willing to say, okay, I'm going to be there on site 24/7 until this rides itself out. And so I was just there on site, overseeing his detox basically for the next 48 hours, get over the difficult part. We should have benzos, stuff like that, to be able to accommodate the medical detox, but those weren't available to us. So
yeah, and you're not that facility. I mean,
no,
you're just not. And boy, who wants to take that on? So wow.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Great question. I mean, situations like that come up, and they're just right in front of you. So Yeah. Anything else? Just broad topic. How would you deal with such a thing? And otherwise, we'll move on to the next piece.
I had one question.
Sure.
It was something I was kind of hearing mixed opinions about, but like I have security cameras set up around the house, but some people would have security cameras facing specifically like the living room area and the kitchen area. And it was, you know, the whole security idea, but not facing bathrooms or bedrooms or anything. I just wanted to see what your opinions were on that.
Karen, I have a strong opinion, so I'll let you go first.
We have some cameras outside of our house. We do not have cameras in our side of our house. And I wouldn't have cameras inside of our house. We actually didn't put the cameras outside of our house. The owner of our home had them previously out there. So yeah, I'm not, that for us, for our organization, that would not be something that we would do, would be to put any cameras inside of our home.
So I think
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think I'd answer in similar way. I have a strong feeling about cameras inside of a house because I'm a really big proponent of building trust with residents. And I feel like I mean it just to me feels more important to get to trusting relationship and truth telling and all of that than it does to maybe catch every infraction and being able to kind of rule on every situation based on the evidence, all of that. I would rather have an environment where people are building trust with each other and working through situations relationally rather than making it about again sort of evidence, sort of courtroom kind of. I use language a lot like we're a clinic, not a courtroom, and I because I want people to sort of think through what our goals are. So if it's a choice between you know, you're going to have them in the house somewhere. I definitely would say, boy, nothing that would point to a bedroom or bathroom where somebody's kind of where they can expect a level of privacy. If you're violating that, I think you're probably in some legal trouble. And so I just really strongly encourage you not to do that. If you must have them, I'd really focus on really public places. But I, of course, would challenge you on whether you want them even in those public spaces. So. But I know you can't be there all the time, and I understand the realities of all of that. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, it helps a lot. Thank you.
We do, Angelo, we do have one out front of our house that says, beware, you're being watched, but it's a fake camera. Just in
have a light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so for external security from, you know, to keep people and possessions safe, that totally makes sense. Inside the house, I tend to want to have a more trusting environment.
So Alan, one of the things I forgot to click on is our return to use policies. I know we
did some of that this morning, but thank you.
Just wanna make sure there's no more questions around
that. Jason mentioned an RCW that speaks to the kind of the 3-day warning and so on. I just want to be really clear that RCW doesn't apply to most of our houses, but is the only thing it applies to literally in Washington State level 3 recovery houses, which is actually about 10 to 12 facilities across the state. It's the only thing that technically that RCW applies to. However, because it's the only thing in state statute that speaks to eviction for substance use, we tend to think that a judge would probably lean on that RCW and try to extend it to the rest of us. So that's why we cite it and give it to you as some guidance as to how you might release somebody. So I would say it's a really high value that we don't so Oxford House, which we're very supportive of Oxford, they're partners of ours in the work that we all do. But Oxford House has a policy that I affectionately call the 15-minute rule, which says if you use 15 minutes, grab your stuff, you're out of here, and don't talk to us for 30 days. And that is kind of the traditional model, and it's been around for, you know, since the founding of Oxford. And most of us who have been around a while probably started our houses with that model. And I would say that we really have, many of us have moved on from that model to say we've got to keep this person's welfare in mind especially as returning to use has become more and more of a lethal proposition where people could die. And so we have tended to want to know where a person's going. Again, we'd like to make a plan with them ahead of time that they could go to a place that they would know where they're going if they were to return to use, that there would be a safe, sober place for them to be for a bit. We've even statewide talked about finding some funding for homes, transitional places that would be willing to take a person for 3 to 5 days while they're doing some, non-medical detox, but just kind of being away from the home, give everyone a little breather. They're in a safe place, thinking about it, in touch with their provider. We want, as an operator, I want to be in touch with that person every day while they're gone until their return. But our attitude is we want you back. And as long as they do what we ask them to do in the interim, our stance is we want to bring you back into the house so that you can get back on the road to recovery and just pick up where you left off and let's keep going. And that really is at WAQRR kind of our stance and our hope that our operators would take on a stance like that, as opposed to something that's more punitive and ultimately could have really lethal consequences for people. Now, the rubber meets the road when we're talking about the third or fourth time that somebody does that, maybe in a month. At some point, then there has to be the question around level of care. So we're back to that conversation that says, wow, do we really have what you need? It seems like you're having trouble being sober here, and this is a sober environment. We take that seriously, and we take the sanctity of that environment for your housemates seriously, and therefore would ask that you, it seems like we might not have enough care and connection for you to succeed in sobriety, and so we at that point we may ask somebody to find another place, but that would be, after we've given them some opportunity to really put some things in place that would help them prevent a future recurrence. Does that make sense to folks? I'm more than happy for people to push back and say that they've got a different way of looking at it. Really love engaging in that conversation. It's really important. But
Alan, I dropped in the chat, there is a respite center in Kennewick that was recently opened. So for those on the east side of the state, it's actually a very nice facility. If you had somebody who returned to use and needed somewhere to go for a short period of time, it's a great place. And they take insurance. So
you guys have everything on the east side of the state. I'll tell you what, it's really something over there. Fantastic. That's good news. Anything else on return to use? All right, we are going to turn to the accreditation process. I think, Sarah, are you taking over at this point?
I am. This is
all right.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. So I'm going to be talking about accreditation. And so when you are going through the accreditation process, the first step that you're going to want to do is go on the WAQRR website and begin an application there. www.waqrr.org, and you click on start an application, where there you will be asked for your email address and you'll be able to create a password. And so once you've done that, it'll take you to a section where you're able to fill out just some basic information. And then further along in the application, there's actually going to be an area where you're able to upload all of your policies and procedures. And it's always a good idea when you're, writing your policies and procedures to just refer back to those WAQRR quality standards. And I also dropped those in the chat, so you can refer to those, and they're also located on our website. And then, accessing your saved application, if you work on it one day and you want to go back, you're going to go through the same steps. You're going to go onto our WAQRR website, and you're going to go start application, sign in that way, and then you're just going to select the application that you've been working on. So we do offer technical assistance over Zoom. Those have been quite useful to folks that are maybe kind of stuck on accessing their saved application, or it's another opportunity to ask questions and just kind of go into the application in more depth. So So what happens after your application is submitted? Well, after that, and after you've uploaded all your documents, we will be notified, the accreditation team will be notified, and we will send you a invoice that is for the accreditation fees, the inspection and membership fees. And you can calculate that. We actually have a tool on the accreditation section of our website, and that's based on capacity. So that's kind of a nice tool to know what is expected monetarily prior to having your documents reviewed. So once we receive that payment, your documents will be sent and assigned to a WAQRR contracted document reviewer. And that process typically takes around 14 days. And they are just reviewing all your documents, making sure that they align with WAQRR standards, making sure, you know, all your T's are crossed and I's are dotted and everything looks great. And so those reports will initially be sent back to Briana and myself, and we will be reviewing those before we send you over a report that will list any recommendations or areas that need some clarification or edits. And so during the document review application process, there can be like a lot of back and forth between us. And so, yeah, there's a lot of communication that we're just, you know, checking in with you, or you're asking us questions, and we can meet like multiple times for a technical assistant Zoom meeting with you all. Yeah, and so once your documents have been submitted and approved, we can move on to the next stage of accreditation, which is the interview portion. And the interview portion is with the accreditation team. We meet over Zoom, and it typically takes for the initial interview about an hour, hour and a half, where we're really just wanting to see kind of what the ground operations look like. We take a deeper dive into your policies and procedures. Again, at the end, it gives you an opportunity to ask questions. And then if all looks well and you pass, which I don't think anyone hasn't, we can move on to the inspection portion of accreditation, where we have one of our inspectors go out and visit your house, check for safety, and make sure everything is safe and secure, and you're providing a family life environment. And a couple of residents from each of your homes will be interviewed. And then, yeah, after the document review, the interview, and the inspection, everyone will be issued a report, so you know exactly, you know, what was discussed, what areas need improvement, your strengths. That will be all included in the report. And then your accreditation will be for a year. And then once that year is up, we do a reaccreditation, which isn't as involved as the initial. We're just gathering like updated documents. If any policies have changed, we will want to collect that. And then we'll do the interview again and an inspection, and then you're good to go again for another year. So does anyone have any questions on those 3 phases of the accreditation process?
It's Fernanda, I do.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
So 2 questions. I know you mentioned during the site visit, you'll interview a couple of residents. What if we don't have any? Do you come back to do that?
So what we can do is we could issue a provisional accreditation, and then we will need to, once you have residents in, we will set up an appointment. One of our site inspectors will set up an appointment via Zoom where they can just chit chat over Zoom. But yeah, we will eventually need to get those interviews, but they don't have to be right at the time of inspection if you don't have residents yet.
And how long do they have to be in your home for that interview? Before that interview can happen, I guess.
I mean, I don't think we have a time frame.
Yeah, we usually check back in 90 days, just with the assumption that you guys are working to get people in there and people are getting settled. So we'll check back in 90 days, but.
Okay. Okay, got it. And then for the operator interview, so we are hoping to close next week on our home, and we've completed the document submission and review and got that approval. When can we schedule the operator interview? After close or?
Fernanda, I think we still need some more documents from you. So why don't you just connect with Sarah after the call, just and check back and make sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will do.
Okay. Any other questions?
With the interviews,
Yes.
does that also include like a lot of, helpful feedback for first-time home operators? Kind of like, hey, this will help you out, like tips and tricks.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We have recommendations. So we review your documents and we definitely give recommendations, and just diving into the process and developing your policies and procedures. We do have some sample documents that can be available if you're really just looking for some inspiration of how other people have done it, if you've just never wrote policies and procedures before. So we do have some resources, and we found that just going through the process in general, going through that document review process, even before you open, is really great, because that gets you thinking of, well, I don't have this policy. What do I want that to look like in my house? How have other people done it? And so it's a really great kind of learning experience to get you thinking about how you want to operate your recovery home, and then also meeting our accreditation policies as well. So yes, we do give feedback, and even the interview process, we're giving feedback as well. So we're really here for you guys. It's not like approved or denied. We want to help get you to the point of being accredited and meeting those standards. So.
And like I said, we have, multiple, you can meet with us as many times as needed for technical assistance meetings. So we're here to help. So we really want to see you guys succeed and help you along the way. So.
All right. Any final questions? I apologize. We've went over a little bit, but I think we're getting to the end. I think our next slides are just about our upcoming events. So April 19th, from 10 to 11:30, we have managing conflict in recovery residences. And this is a great one if you want to bring your residents on, your operators or house leads on. Alan actually leads this discussion. So yeah, it's a great webinar. You can register for that on our WAQRR webpage under the More tab. And then finally, any final questions for us? All right, well, we're here for you if you have any questions that come up along the way. Here's our contact info. So Sarah and I, any accreditation questions, technical assistance that we spoke about, and our executive director's email. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Any final words, Alan, Karen?
Well, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Oh, and the slides, we will be sending that off. Probably be on Monday. Get those out to you via email that you registered with. So be on the lookout for those. Not have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.